On today's episode of Talk About Your Community, we're asking a deep question. What happens to customer relationships when AI becomes yet another layer between companies and the people that they serve? Let's go ahead and dive right in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you happen to be. You've tuned into Clocktower Advisors Talk About Your Community. And on this show, we bring in a variety of community builders, sociologists, psychologists, anybody who's got something to say about building connection online, offline, and in hybrid ways. And today is no exception. My guest today is Bill Johnston, founder of Structure 3C. And one of the original architects of enterprise community strategy at brands like Autodesk and Dell. Bill spent decades treating community as a serious business asset, and he's now pushing hard on where AI truly helps and where it maybe erodes trust, and what should never be automated. So we're going to go ahead and unpack where AI belongs in the community and where it absolutely doesn't today. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention this is a live stream that goes up to YouTube as well as here on LinkedIn Live. And if you are so inclined, I always appreciate the follows and the likes and the comments that come through. I try to answer each and every one as they come through every week. And we do this show every other Friday-ish, usually about 2 to 3 shows a month. We'll be posting our March schedule soon, so be sure to follow the Clocktower Advisors company page on LinkedIn or the YouTube channel for Clocktower Advisors. Enough of a commercial there. I did want to say, just on a serious note, that I got news from Jenny Wiggle-Bonds this morning that she had heard that one of our own, someone from our community profession, Carolyn Secar, was one of the people who was tragically killed in the avalanche out in Tahoe. And just wanted to say, on behalf of the professional community of colleagues that we have, that she will be missed. Anyone who wants to make some kind of expression of hope for her family is welcome to do so. I will try to see if there's any kind of GoFundMe or anything that's set up for that, and we'll put it up both on the Clocktower Advisors page and on the Community Consultants Collective, if you're so inclined. But again, our heart goes out to the family and children of Carolyn, and you will be missed. So turning back to happier topics, I want to go ahead and bring Bill on the screen here. Bill, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, although heavy heart as well for everyone that was affected by that avalanche. That is a community that I'm a part of, and it is just it's cast a pall over. We just got feet of powder, right, on the one hand, which everybody's excited about, but it's dangerous, and there are awful accidents like that. So just echoing your your kind words and supportive words there. It was a very sad loss to hear about.
Yeah, and not just Carolyn, but all those who lost their lives and were families affected by this just terrible situation. And I know Jenny just sent me a text this morning just in grief about this. I think she knew Carolyn a bit, and I know many of us in our space we're sort of a small swimming pool.
Right.
We all kind of know each other by maybe 1 or 2 degrees of separation at most.
Right.
Anyways, well, Bill, we were just kind of saying before we started the stream here, we've been sort of in the same world for a while. This has been an early opportunity. This is the first opportunity we've had to really kind of get on and rap about community issues a little bit. So I'm really glad we're able to do this. You want to talk a little bit about some of the recent thinking and writing that you've been doing around AI and how it has an impact on community. And one of the big questions that I think comes to mind is if a company is looking at adding AI features to their community, what kind of worries or concerns or caveats do you have when an organization approaches you and starts talking about this?
Yeah, and Todd, thanks for having me on, and it's a real pleasure. I'm sort of kicking myself that we haven't been talking more and more often. So, really excited to be here today. And the caveat with anything I say today is I'm working to figure it out just like everyone else, right? So in the writing that I'm doing to explore, I'm really trying to put ideas and frameworks out there, but not declare, this is the canonical truth, canonical and objective truth about any of this, because, it's changing so fast. But there are precedents and patterns that we've seen before that will help me answer your question, which is like, what do I worry about? I worry about the same things I think we all always worry about, which is, number one, companies seeing this technology in combination with community as sort of a way to get, labor for free or things done in a cheap way. And I use the term cheap very intentionally there, as opposed to doing it in a way that creates value for all participants, right? So my number one worry is it becomes a race to the bottom for basically spitting answers back at people that without the community will become increasingly wrong and unhelpful. I guess the second part of that, and maybe more important, is that it becomes, as we sort of talked about and framed up this conversation, it becomes yet another layer of abstraction or another air gap between companies and their customers when those relationships have never been more important, right? And then there are the obvious experiential issues around just not, deploying this in a skillful way, or deploying it in a way that doesn't involve the community members and potential members and other stakeholders as well. So it's not really something that is agreed upon or frankly known about the community. It's just sort of inflicted on them. I mean, I could really go on with the stuff that I worry about. You probably could add 10 things to that list. Probably anyone on the stream could as well. But really, those are my key concerns, is just companies who aren't fully bought into the holistic concept of community and investing in customer relationships, just see it as another shortcut, and then having it basically inflicted upon a community or a customer experience in ways that aren't super thoughtful.
I want to dig into that shortcut mentality, because I think that that raises a question of something that one of our colleagues, Adrian Speyer, who's a buddy, known for a long time, his position has sort of been, I don't think there's going to be a need, for some of these communities at some point. Like, AI could end up replacing a lot of these community platforms. And I'm wondering, sort of in the wild, have you run into any enterprises that have said, like, what, we're going to remove our investment in community platforms and really just go with AI answer bots for everything?
Thankfully, not yet. I'm sure it's an inevitability. I feel like, I won't name names, but I mean, I think everybody can figure it out. Like, I feel like that's kind of the pitch of the latest incarnation of one of our formerly favorite platforms. So yeah, like, I think it's kind of terrifying, but also clarifying, right? Like, if that's the mentality of a company, I think let's see that sooner rather than later and see the consequences, right? Or maybe we'll all be surprised. Maybe there are no consequences. I would bet my career that there will be, but maybe there won't.
I would agree with you. I think there's the real potential for a train wreck there. Particularly, I think all of there's been some good research. I can't remember if it was Gardner did it or which of the big think tanks, kind of talked about it. But they were saying that people who call support lines, they want to talk to a human. That there's a strong preference for human to human interaction. And it's not just demographically, like by age group. It's, if you're trying to get something resolved, if you end up talking with a chatbot and you just get a bunch of circular answers, or it's not really kind of coming in meaningful ways, man, that's just frustrating as can be. And I think and something else you said to sort of layer onto that. What happens when it's just the AI talking to the AI about
right?
generating those answers?
Yeah, we've seen like how uninteresting that is. If you looked at whatever the heck the Clawbot network was, that burned out very quickly. But it was like I looked at it, I just kind of checked in for like 5 minutes, and I'm like, this is fundamentally uninteresting to me. So going back to that desire for human connection, especially like it's not everyone, right? Like we wouldn't have ATMs if like everyone needed that sort of synchronous, real-time, face-to-face human connection all the time. But like with continuing with the bank as an analogy, sometimes you want and need that, right? And I think the support is one end of the support use case is one end of a spectrum that goes all the way to advocacy as well. Why do people do like irrational things and make extraordinary contributions on behalf of a brand, right? It's because they want that connection. They feel a strong sense of belonging. They want to express that they're part of the in crowd. And like when you start futzing with that motivation, bad things are going to happen.
100%. I'll tell you, I've been thinking about this in the past few weeks in terms of, just wondering if that what we're seeing with AI is a pivot from transactional uses of community into more identity-oriented community spaces. And so, and I mean, I don't know if it's a false distinction because, people who go and use a support community, an enterprise support community, generally go because they have a question they want answered. They get the question answered, and their tendency is not to come back,
right?
In a lot of cases. But the communities that tend to work and thrive are ones that are connected to that sense of identity, of belonging, of something a little more core to who I am or things that I care about. And those are the places I want to be at and contribute to.
100%. I mean, I think, like if you really start to unpack the numbers for strategies that are completely like hanging their hat on support, it's a relatively small fraction of customers who participate at all. A slightly larger, but maybe that's not fair, a larger portion of customers who consume that content in various ways, maybe not even on the community, but you're just with support as like that primary break fix interaction, like you're touching a relatively small part of your customer base with an active community, right? But like what I learned, and frankly, it took me a long time to sink in through my thick skull. But what I saw at Autodesk during my 2 tours of duty is, we have really complex products, or we had. It's my first love, so I'll always identify as still being there. But we had people whose careers, were dependent on the software and that used that software like every day from like college through retirement, right? So they formed a deep connection with being in that tool and the processes and the industries around that tool. And it was just like such rich and fertile ground for, what are the opportunities for community practice? What are the opportunities for innovation? What are the opportunities to help, leverage community for adoption and learning? It's just, looking at like a customer life cycle, like a true life cycle lifespan in enterprise, which is where I primarily work. And that's why I love it, because these connections tend to last for a long time. Yep. It's really kind of mind blowing what the opportunities are when you stop looking at customer journeys as like, awareness to product trial and start looking at it as what does it mean in the context of like an entire career, right?
Yeah, I love it. I think of it in the way you were talking about the Autodesk product. It's sort of like the way that a samurai looks at their sword, right? This is part of who I am. It's a part of my work. It's a part of my practice. And so, like if that's my identity,
it's so funny. So those of you who know me know CEO I was serving under at Autodesk, Carl Bass, Carl and I didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but he used this really cool analogy of, our customers are the samurai and we're the sword maker, right? So we're in service to them. We're crafting tools, like trying to craft exceptional tools for them, but like ultimately, like they're the star, they're the samurai. And I love that. I mean, it was a kind of a macho, if you will, analogy, sure. but still, like, it resonated.
I'm a big fan of samurai films, so yeah, there we go. But
there you go.
Just wanted to pause to do a quick shout out to some of the people who showed up on the chat. Michael Tharrington, David DeWald, Valentina Moldovan, Jeffrey Rowe.
Hey guys,
Donnie Weinstein, like a lot of familiar faces and friends out here. I just wanted to drop in a couple of comments here to react to. Valentina said, AI replacing communities got my heart rate up.
Same.
A little provocative. I mean, I think, that's been the worry because I think with the community space over the past couple of years, there's been this rising anxiety or temperature in the room about like people were losing their jobs. They were getting, rift, just like, I mean, across the board, there've been rifts, happening for organizations on the marketing side, overall. But I think for community pros, we took it to heart saying like, well, what is going on? Are they going to try to replace communities with AI? Am I going to be replaced with an AI bot? I feel that your viewpoint on this is pretty similar to mine, which is that I think that there is a collaboration here. It's not a either or. It's not a zero sum game with this, but it's interesting stuff. I definitely want to get into that. David DeWald poking in to say hi. Knowledge shift, community shift.
Exactly.
Communities of practice. Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. And I think like definitely we are like kind of, abusing AI right now. I think we'll look at the other side of the coin, at some point for sure. I do want to like chime in on the career, like state of the industry thing. If we could just spend a couple of minutes there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those of us that have been here for a while, have seen a few cycles. They're always different. The last one that I hope we're coming out of felt a little more severe. But I think also keep in mind, we weren't the only sort of segment affected. So I started my career as kind of a hybrid community guy and information architect, right? So I have a foot in the design space, and like a lot of the conversations around design and design teams, especially in enterprise, like you could replace the word design with community and we would feel right at home, right? So there are these big shifts happening that, I mean, frankly, I'm observing and acknowledging. I don't have, a point of view or any helpful advice just yet, other than we're not the only ones, and we may be able to learn from our colleagues sort of across the office from us as we try to navigate this. I do think a lot of the layoffs were sort of this performative nod towards the efficiency of these massive AI investments that were made. And, I think a lot of firms are going to find that they cut a little too deep, right? And that community will be even more of a competitive advantage in the coming months and years.
I think that's a thoughtful framing of the situation. And it makes me think a little bit too of, those organizations that did cut into the bone, past the muscle, may live to regret it, particularly because of some of the advances of AI. I'm reminded of one of my other, friends and colleagues, George C.O.C. Samuels, who's an entrepreneur, came out of the crypto community sort of space, and he contends that now with a very small team and some effective AI tools, you can build a highly competitive tech stack or set of products. And get to that $1 billion valuation a lot faster, than that. So, there was always the old adage that, you have, as an organization, you always have to beware of a younger, sexier version of yourself coming out. I think AI is just going to augment the ability to do that.
I guess I would counter that with, I think that's true. And what happens year 2, right? What happens with operation, like this whole concept of maintenance has, in a like really interesting and thoughtful way, has come up a lot lately. Like, how do we care and feed what we have and think about it over the long term? And like, I love a good hyperscaling story, but yeah, I mean, is it just for an exit, which is one thing, or are you like really trying to build a business that lives and breathes for a while, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be like, we're in such, like, it's such a cliche, but we're in like such an interesting time right now. We're going to learn so much over the next couple of years.
I think so too, but and just sort of one final bow on this. I mean, one of the reasons that I've been passionate about getting the Community Consultants Collective, off the ground, and we've got a wonderful board of, 12 people now, in that group, and I see Jeffrey Rowe is, he's one of our newest board members.
Very cool. Group. Congrats.
But the idea behind that group is to enable another career path for community professionals.
Love that.
When you were starting this, and I was kind of getting started out, working with Richard over at Feverbee, and then rolling out with my own consultancy work, there weren't a lot of people to look at as role models for that work. And not that I'm holding me or anybody else up as role models, but I think having a space where you have that connection with others to be able to
100%
grow your career.
Like, you're navigating like in a vacuum.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I know you're very interested in sort of like talent journeys, of people through their careers and through an enterprise. That's something for me. Like, I evolved into a community career around from being in the recruiting and talent acquisition space.
Right.
And so, like, I'm always kind of thinking about, like, what does that career trajectory look like for us? Like, if we're to be valid and viable as a career choice for people, there needs to be some pathing that's available.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about that this morning, believe it or not. The number of times I had to fight just to have community as in the same space as like a program manager job description, right? There just aren't. I don't know if many people, I mean, Erica probably did it at Salesforce. I'm speaking for her on her behalf a little bit, but like, I can think of a handful of people that probably advocated for and got those, career paths and levels built in through HR, but it's like the exception rather than the rule.
That's been my experience. I did an interview series on the idea of the chief community officer a year or two back, and I had Donnie Weinstein was on the was part of that interview group, and then Marius Chorta from IBM.
Yep, two buddies. Yep,
Nikki Thibodeau. Like all of them have built a path for themselves, but they were blazing a trail through heavy woods to get into those roles, or they claimed those roles for themselves. And,
just pick the title, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's get back a little bit to the AI conversation. I know we're probably going to run down a couple of side quest paths here, as we go through the conversation. But as you said, we're all learners in a space that is rapidly evolving and finding ways to use it.
And it wasn't always, by the way. Like, if I may. So I really wanted to have this conversation as early as 2017, 2018, right? Mm-hmm. So I fielded a survey in 2018, like a couple of years after I started Structure, and started asking people. I framed it as AI and exponential technologies, right? So it was like, crypto was still a big deal at that time, and got a lot of responses, but like, frankly, we didn't collectively know what we didn't know, right? So I ran that survey for a couple of years until I realized, like, I was just getting the same answers over and over. And I think what happened was, like, initially when we thought about AI, and there were all these arguments about, is it AI, is it ML, is it RPA, blah blah blah. Those turned out to be sort of uninteresting conversations, but conversations that were the only conversations we could have at the time, right? And then obviously November 2022, things changed with ChatGPT, and so we were able to like have a relatively simple interface. We're like, oh, okay, cool. I can AI all I want, right? So, that obviously sort of led to, content creation, this idea of co-pilots for different activities. We, started to be able to code and vibe code. Agents are like the hot thing now. And so it's been interesting that I think, have intuitively known something like this was coming. And we've always, sorry to use the collective we, but we've always known hey, there has to be ways to automate the block and tackle stuff so that I can focus on the really high value, relationship building stuff. And so now we're finally here, right? Now we can finally start to experiment in ways that are impactful, ideally safe, thoughtful, and in a way that's co-developing with the community. But, for a long time, we're just sort of spinning. We saw it.
Yeah.
We saw
totally
it coming,
right.
but we couldn't get our hands on it unless your best friend was, some, ML engineer or, dev genius.
I want to say back around the same time frame as you were sending those surveys out, I got hooked up with a group. It was a Wisconsin-based group called Advancing AI Wisconsin.
Oh, cool.
And it was cool because a couple of the people in that group, shout out to Kurt Hallbeck and a few other friends that were involved with that. They were sounding, I don't know if it was alarm bells, but they were saying look, there's some tech convergence that's coming here with blockchain, crypto, AI. There were some interesting techs on the horizon, and we just didn't know what they were going to be. And like you, I think the reaction that we got was interest, but sort of a nebulous understanding at best of how it was going to affect things. And at the time, it was thinking about with all of these professions like accounting and law, contract reviews, things like that, that it's gonna work some of these people out of a job, Right. And in fact, we haven't seen that happen. We haven't seen the level of nuance or sensitivity to human communication in the LLMs as advanced as they've become
right.
to this date. Do you have any worries we're going to get there anytime soon where, that sort of human-like moderator presence is something that could be deployed in community spaces?
So a couple of answers there.
Yeah.
One is we did a thought experiment with a client who has a three-letter title and had one of the more prominent public-facing AIs, and kind of explored if this entity were a member of the community, right? How would it be received? Would it be novel and interesting? Would it be a turnoff? How might we think about the rules of engagement and disclosure with this thing? And that was pretty eye-opening, right? It was it would be kind of in a way having a Kardashian in the community, except it's just a tech celebrity. So, will we eventually get to the point where, at least from a text-based perspective, an AI or agent probably could pass for a human? I mean, I think we're probably already there. I think this starts to get into some of the questions you were framing up earlier, which is okay, really, folks, how do we do this thoughtfully, skillfully, and ethically? And yeah, I mean, I think let's dive into that. I mean, I think that's one dimension, this sort of member engagement in an appropriate way is one sort of facet of the valuable and interesting things we could start to experiment with for sure.
I love that. And so let me propose that as a little bit of a thought experiment for us to explore here for a minute. I'm a fan or a nerd about Jeremy Utley and some of his works from the D School at Stanford around innovation. And I one of his exercises that he frames brainstorms with is to say, what would be a really bad idea to try? And so is it a bad idea to deploy an AI bot as really kind of part of a community management team to be there? I mean, I could see like an upside of, hey, it's on 24/7, to greet people or to maybe even welcome them and point out some other people with similar interests based on how they filled out their profiles. Is that the worst thing in the world to have something like that deployed in the platform, so long as it is identifying itself as,
Right.
hey, I'm a bot, I'm your community bot, but here's some people you might be interested in, or here's some conversations
Yeah.
based on your interest that you might want to check out. Right.
I mean, I think it's like, how visible is that? Because you could see it as, it doesn't necessarily have to be a personality. It's just like a part of the interface that's guiding you towards the next interesting action, right? I mean, there's this whole concept of generative UI right now, like beyond personalization, like, your interface could be down to the pixel, customized to your preferences or your patterns of behavior and consumption, like to date. So, I mean, I think there are all kinds of ways to put that sort of experience into a community. I mean, I think if you were going to do a personality, frankly, learning the hard way, like we did some early experiments at Autodesk with something called Ava, which was based initially on Watson X. And then I think there was can't remember the name of the company but it basically like tried to mimic like real human like expressions, and it was frankly pretty creepy. I think like that singular personality to interface with community members probably isn't the right way to go. I mean, it's an interesting design problem, actually. Like, how do we, if we're going to use personalities for these, is it uncanny valley, or is it like kind of the best way to deploy this in the interface? And probably that would be on a case-by-case basis, based upon the community. And the thought that was triggered when you said, like, what's the worst case? Don Lacalade, who was at Dell for a long time and then at LiveWorld, had this really great answer when people were pushing for community ROI, which is, well, let's just turn it off. Let's turn it off and see what happens.
Yeah.
And that if nothing else, there's your ROI one way or another.
Extreme. It's funny. I recall when I can't point to where he talked about it, but Rich Millington, kind of said the same thing recently. He's like, I could wish that more organizations would be willing to take a radical step of turning off the community to see what kind of effect it has. I mean, it's sort of a throwing the baby out with the bathwater situation.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't think she was ever serious. But that's definitely one way to A/B test, I guess. But anyways, I was thinking about like, okay, what's the worst thing I could conceive of doing? It's basically like just putting agents in the seats of every community pro working on a community, and just watching that run off the rails. I think, and somebody will do it. So
I'm sure someone will try. Yeah. I'm sure they will if they have not already. Tried. We just haven't heard about it yet. As I think about sort of like the bad idea thought experiment with this, where I keep coming back to every time is those are situations where AI is deployed without a human in the loop, being involved with it. So, creating summaries to discussion threads, great, but without citing, where each of those summary sentences came from, to see the humans that are involved with that, without having a human reviewer to be able to say, yeah, that's accurate, or no, that's not quite right. I know in my daily interactions with multiple LLMs that I work with, in my work, like I'm always having fights with them about, that's not quite where I need it to be. Please revise that again. Trying to get a draft to like 85, 90% is not a one prompt and done, kind of situation.
Right. Exactly. So humans are complex. Yeah.
So I think, the bad idea is like having totally AI moderated content. That's never going to work. There's always, edge cases that require human judgment that there will always be a percentage that are maybe, easy to make an adjudication that, this is definitely a bad actor, responding in the community. But then there are a lot of nuanced cases where somebody's misinterpreted, they had a bad day, or there needs to be a little human compassion injected into the mix with all
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's so many ways it could go wrong, and I think there are many fewer ways it can go right. And I think like it or not, that's now part of our job, right?
Yeah.
So we're all collectively figuring it out, right? It's you're having conversations on the show. The event I'm hosting in San Francisco next week, I found 30 of the smartest people I could find that had a free Wednesday. And like the two things we're talking about two things next week: AI and community, and framing up what that means, what the opportunities are, what the risks are. And then we're talking about community value in the afternoon, right?
That's great.
And those are the two areas of focus, because those are the two kind of burning issues. One new, one old, one constant, right?
So as you're talking to clients, prospects about AI in the mix with the community, what are you offering to them as maybe ways to get started thinking about it? Like when they say, like, we want AI to enhance our customer success or adoption of our products or tools, and we think that needs to be incorporated in the community somehow. How are you broaching that conversation with them?
So I've got a working, I love making frameworks, right? Maybe too much. So I have a working framework that I won't inflict upon you all right now, but it has essentially 6 areas with how I bundled the possibilities / components. So there's community intelligence. So really getting at, what's happening here, how's the community running? What are the opportunities? What are the risks? There's a category around member experience. There's a category around team augmentation, where we've spent a lot of time talking right now. There's a category around strategic alignment, right? So, how do we ensure the community is, fulfilling on the goals of the sponsors, right? There's innovation and foresight, which is bringing this, something I've been kind of pounding the table on for a long time, moving beyond ideas to what's next, right? Getting to real and thoughtful innovation activities, and I'm starting to explore what strategic forecasting might look like in a community setting augmented by AI. And then lastly, there's the sort of the plumbing, right? I'm kind of calling it enterprise integration, but how do you build the connective tissue with just the data pipes, maybe even with things like MCP protocols between different agents or servers within an enterprise and throughout a partner ecosystem. But that's kind of how I'm starting to frame it up, intelligence, experience, community team augmentation, strategic alignment, the innovation piece, and then lastly, the enterprise sort of data and MCP fabric.
I love how it sort of maps to an overall strategy, for an organization, using community and connecting it to the stakeholders that are within and the members' experiences themselves. Two of those in particular stood out for me because they're areas of strong interest right now. One is strategic alignment. Sort of as community professionals, I hear this is a perennial topic. How do we talk to internal stakeholders? How do we express the value of community to management? And I've been exploring the idea of how do you, as a community professional, how do you map that and reflect that back to the departments and the executive leadership about hey, this is where I'm seeing your support for community. Here's where I see the gap. Here's where I see the opportunity for that. If we could get a little bit better at quantifying that, I think that helps us as we're making a case and ensure that we get funding, for enterprise community platforms and teams,
100%. Yeah. But I think the one opportunity, and this is just a very simple and, as I say, an obvious path, we've all done these moment in time studies to prove community value, right? We did this gigantic what was essentially an econometric study at Dell around one of our communities, mapping it to accounts that participated in communities and the effect of that community participation on purchase volume, purchase frequency year over year, et cetera. I mean, it was like super cool, but it took like 6 months and like probably close to $1 million to do it. And you had to have the, the digital experience instrumented in a way to track all this, which I don't even know you could do now with all the privacy laws. So there are opportunities to take those experiments from the past that were just heavyweight or frankly not easily repeatable and think about, okay, now that we have basically a superhero on our team, like maybe not a particularly bright or ethical superhero, so we need to watch them, but how might we, take some of those heavier weight experiments and try to get it as close to real time as possible. And I think that's one unlock for communicating value back to stakeholders who are investing in the community, for marketing, GTM, customer success, what have you. So yeah, I think that's one way. I realized also as I'm sitting here, I dodged your question earlier, which is as clients are asking for this, like how do we start to test and learn into this? And I think, the way I've been thinking about it, our teams have been thinking about it is just situationally and opportunistically, is there a way to take like maybe a content feature that's published on the community and turn it into more of a real-time customized report, right? Using a very like, hyper detailed prompt for deep research, right? So instead of like, summarizing the last 6 months of industry reporting on the hydrogen economy, we're doing something that's more bespoke to the person asking, right? And it's not, published for the entire community, it's published for a subset. So I think there are obviously simple content experiments you can run. I'm really interested in the idea of generative interfaces, right? Beyond personalization. The first community I worked on was Tech Republic. And we made this massive investment. The company was initially called Narrowcast Technologies, and they changed it to Tech Republic. And the whole point was we can personalize everything down to the pixel for anyone that comes on the site. What the founders didn't realize, and what we found out the hard way, was number one, that's like computationally intensive. And number two, if you're going to offer, like multiple content and experience permutations, per member, like you have to have the content and experiences to back that up, right? It's like, just makes it like infinitely more complicated. Now, that's been rattling around in my brain for the last 25 years. So now it's like, oh, now we can do it. So what does that mean, right? This isn't just like personalizing a feed or, personalizing some content recommendations or member recommendations. This is like literally this promise of like, we could hypothetically customize every pixel on that screen and maybe even like think about how this might personalize experiences out in the real world. Like that to me is the thing that I'm really churning on right now. Like, what are the possibilities?
You're the first person I've heard talking about this, and I think it's amazing. I'd love to explore that a little more deeply, maybe even another full interview around that. I think that's fascinating. The other part of that framework that you mentioned, I just wanted to get back to that quickly too, was the idea of innovation and foresight. I think so many communities have analytics that are set up that are almost reactive, or they're sort of the tail. Predictive analytics, or like things that are predicting markets or predicting the evolution of product. Those are really interesting to me. I don't think we practice enough foresight work in community.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the first problem, and I learned this the hard way at Dell, right? When we were redesigning IdeaStorm, like one of the biggest problems is you have a disproportionately small group of people participating in any given community. Like it's not representative at all, right? So like almost every suggestion is an outlier, which has its pros and cons, right? But the first thing is, like, how do you ensure like a representative sample of your market, right? Or at least your customer base. to have like high quality, high signal stuff, especially if it's more passively collected, right? These behavioral signals and looking at contributions and things like that. So, what we discovered with IdeaStorm is just an open call for whatever you want to give us is really bad, right? So we started really shaping like what the submissions should look like. We started time and topic bounding different idea sprints. So it wasn't like, so that we wouldn't get everything from, hey, you should put a whiteboard on the back of every monitor to, some early kind of cool ideas around water cooling CPUs. And so then you start to think about, well, if we take that to its next step, like, is it a combination of collecting signal from places where you can collect it, including the community, and then shaping, innovation sprints or topics or sessions in the community, like around that? That's kind of one obvious next step. But then there's the what's next. I mean, the one really interesting place I've been thinking about recently is this idea of like true strategic foresight, right? I actually treated myself to a class in Copenhagen right before Christmas.
Oh, you went to the Copenhagen class? Yeah.
Yeah, that I've been wanting to take forever. It was fascinating, right? And learned all about kind of the history of scenarios and scenario planning at Rand to now, and like learned the methodology and experimented with, a group of people from all over the world. It was a weird time to be an American in Copenhagen, I can tell you that. But it's interesting because out of that came this idea that it feels like there are these big sort of heroic scenarios coming out the other end of strategic foresight. And there's an opportunity, like at the same time that Rand was developing this sort of foresight and scenario planning, they were also like running Delphis, right, which were expert communities essentially. And so I think there's some interesting spaces to play around, like firing up these sort of really hyper qualified expert communities along with more automated innovation sprints. And I just feel like there's so much kind of open space now.
It's a green
to experiment.
Space.
Yeah, beyond just the social suggestion box, I guess, is what I'm kind of slowly meandering towards.
Well, no, because I mean, as you were saying, like if you open an innovation space, in a community, an ideation space, and you don't offer any kind of structure or approach to it, you don't shape it at all. If you ask for anything, you end up getting a lot of nothing, right?
Yeah, or very, very little of something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I really love that. So yes, I mean, I think, more deliberate spaces that are, tracking signals of change, that are shaping in I like innovation sprints. I think that's an awesome idea, to be able to structure something like that towards a particular question or end, even things that are happening in our profession. I think, but I mean, for me, the value of strategic foresight, it's not about prophecy. It's about shaping the future towards better futures that we would like to see.
Yeah. If you can't imagine a specific future, you can't navigate towards it. Right. So it's really that idea. We interviewed for a podcast a couple of months ago, we interviewed Ed Finn at Arizona State University. He runs this really cool thing called the Institute for Science and the Imagination. And he has this whole like diatribe around to move forward, right? As a society, we have to build imaginative capacity. It's like something that we've just kind of lost the habit of, right? So that was another reason I really wanted to dig into foresight. But like just zooming out and going back to the value question, I mean, my hope is AI, however you want to describe it, whatever way it is expressed, it's a way for us to sort of be exponentially more effective in telling that value story, right? Because it helps broaden the types of activities that we can include community in, right? And so if we can expand the surface area of what is at its heart, like building relationship infrastructure, or Nillifer Merchant has been using a similar term, relationship substrate, right? If we can invest in that and have figure out ways to skillfully employ AI in taking the block and tackle stuff off of our plates, I think there's a really interesting value story that starts to reemerge for this next generation of community experiences, the community profession, the perceived value within the organization. I mean, unfortunately, the term community in some cases inspires almost like a contempt, right? And for executives. I mean, it's really kind of disheartening. And I think most any other professional wants to fight that.
I'm ready to get into fist fights over that, myself. And I think, and I work in some fractionals, executive groups, and I ask that question a lot. Sort of, what is your impression of community work? And for a lot of them, it's an abstraction. I don't know that I've come across outright contempt, or maybe not that they've let on. That's the direction I get. But I think there's some PR to be done to renovate the work that we do.
And maybe it's not contempt. Maybe it's I've described it as the French knight problem, from Monty Python, which is we already got one. We have this, so therefore I'm just going to devalue it.
Maybe cynicism or I think you're right. So that there's absolutely work to be done professional wise. That being said, there's no place I would rather be than working in this space.
Yeah, I mean, those of us that are hanging on through this really tough time will be the ones that are shaping and defining the next generation of it, right? To state the obvious.
Hear. Hey, before we wrap up here, wanted to do a quick shout out to Tim Bonneman and Jenny Wiggle-Bonds.
Hey guys,
dropped in there on the chat. Wonderful to see you. And everybody else that was able to jump in and spend this time with us, hanging out. David is commenting on what we just said there, that likely because they see community as a place for complaints and negativity.
Yeah. Insightful comment.
I would say, one of the things that I'd like to see us embrace a little bit more is that, community is essentially a little subversive. And that's why I think a lot of hierarchical organizations are uncomfortable with it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that sucks about the sort of step that everyone's taken back from mass social is there was this sort of peace, love, Woodstock moment where, the promise of the Clue Train Manifesto manifested for a hot minute, right? Where CEOs were willing to, have those conversations and be, as real as they could be. And I think we've largely stepped back from that. So that's the one thing I kind of miss about the social era. Because I think David's spot on. Those conversations are happening regardless, as we all know. But you get a sensitive executive, and they're like, "Oh my God! There's this one negative comment on this one forum. We should just shut this all down." It's that's not how it works.
Yeah, I remain insistently hopeful, or maybe I'm a realistic optimist that we can get back to a version of that's mature and embraces what the original promise of the internet was supposed to be.
Me too. That's what I'm holding out hope for.
I think it's a good note to end on, Bill. This has been fantastic. Love the conversation.
I really enjoyed having it.
Yeah, and for those of you, if you tried to tune in 2 weeks ago when I was having Dane Dunstan on to talk about his book, Reclaiming Your Genius, and we did have a recorded session for that, and we'll be posting it up in a couple of weeks here as soon as Kalisa is able to edit through all of that. And then we'll be posting the March schedule for the Talk About Your Community live streams coming up here shortly as well. In the meantime, thank you so much for tuning in. Love the comments and the questions throughout. I'll try to jump in and respond to everybody after the show here. But in the meantime, please take care of yourselves. Close the laptop, walk outside, breathe in the fresh air, feel the sun on your face, rejuvenate yourself this weekend. Because if you aren't taking care of yourself, it's hard to build good communities that way. So that being said, Bill, thanks again. We'll see everybody.
Thanks for having me, Todd. Yeah.
Thanks, Bill. Bye.
Cheers.